My first night on the floor, Ivan did not speak to me until we were already inside. He always did that. He said the dining room deserved silence before instruction. From the street, the restaurant did not look like a restaurant. No sign, no visible name, only a pane of glass set into dark stone and a single brass handle polished so often it reflected like liquid gold. Reservations were not made, they were granted. Guests applied, submitted palate histories, health disclosures, personal essays about their relationship to food. Only then were they considered for the waiting list. Only then were they invited to wait. Elite was too blunt a word for what this place was. Inside, the air was cool, but not cold. Calibrated. The scent was faintly mineral, as though the room itself had been filtered. No trace of kitchen smoke. No garlic lingering in corners. Only a clean, nearly sterile note beneath the warmth of beeswax candles. The lighting shifted subtly as you moved. Not dim, not bright. Designed to sculpt cheekbones, soften flaws, bring warmth to skin tones without casting shadows that might interrupt the plate. Every table was spaced exactly the same distance from the next. No accidental overhearing, no interruption of narrative. Each table had one server, not a team, not a runner, one, for the entire evening. That server would guide the guests through the tasting, explain the voyage, adjust wine pairings, calibrate water temperature, clear plates without disrupting conversation, and anticipate breath patterns before questions formed. Tonight, I was shadowing Ivan. He had been here, 8 years. He moved like someone who understood gravity differently. Before service, I was handed a profile. Leather-bound, discreet. Mr. and Mrs. Halberg. Anniversary. Dietary tolerances? None. Psychological calibration? Complete. Flavor density index? Moderate to high? Him. Fluctuating? Her. Somatic responsiveness? Elevated. Food intolerance? None. Religious restriction? Acknowledged but unobserved. I did not know what half of that meant. Ivan did. He did not smile when I asked. The menu is a map, he told me. The profile is the terrain. The kitchen behind us hummed, not loudly, not mechanically, more like the sound of controlled air moving through hidden vents. Every surface was immaculate, it stainless steel or matte black stone. Induction burners recessed into marble, cryogenic chamber humming faintly in one corner, a centrifuge still spinning, clarifying a consommé to glass-like transparency. There were no shouted orders, no clatter. Every chef worked in near silence, precision over performance. And at the center of it all stood Dave. No surname, no theatrics, no raised voice. Just Dave. He wore no hat. His hair was cut close, his apron spotless. When he moved, others adjusted without being told. If Dave so much as paused nearing an ingredient, it became the next culinary trend in Imperial City, in Asil, in Kart Hadasht. He did not look at guests. He looked at profiles. I watched him earlier that evening lift a silver tray from the cold chamber. The medallions resting inside were pale, perfectly circular, faintly marbled, each labeled discreetly with a reservation number. He ran a gloved finger across the surface of one and smiled. Aligned, he said. That was all. Ivan placed a hand lightly between my shoulder blades as the doors to the dining room opened. Remember, he said quietly. We do not serve food. He adjusted my cuff so it sat exactly at wrist bone. We serve essence. The Hallbergs had arrived. They were seated at table 3, the most intimate position in the room, angled just slightly toward the kitchen pass. They looked exactly as their profile suggested. He was structured, dark suit, watch face precise, movements economical. She wore silk the color of soft champagne. Her smile was luminous, but measured. Shoulders held a fraction too tight. I felt a pulse in my throat. I had studied the menu all week. 6 courses: Introduction, Cultivation, Retrieval, Reduction, Reflection, Assimilation. I could recite every ingredient, every temperature, every pairing. But standing there, watching Ivan approach the table with a stillness that bordered on devotion, I understood something else. This was not service. This was choreography. Ivan inclined his head slightly as we reached him. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Hallberg," he said softly. "Welcome. Tonight we will be serving you." He did not say what. He never did. And as I stood just behind his right shoulder, watching the way the candlelight settled across their faces, I could not believe I had been allowed through the door at all. I thought I had been hired to serve plates. I had no idea what I was about to witness. Ivan never carries 2 plates at once. He says it disrupts intention. The amuse-bouche is always delivered separately, individually, privately. "Introduction," he murmured to me as we stepped toward table 3. "Never rush an introduction." He did not look at me when he said that. His eyes were already on them. The kitchen pass had been immaculate when he lifted the first plate. Slate black porcelain, matte and heavy, faintly warm from resting near the lamps. Its shallow concavity was engineered to gather attention toward the center. At its heart, hand-cut Wagyu tartare. Not ground, never ground. Each cube cut with a knife honed so finely, it parted muscle without tearing fiber. The marbling glistened beneath candlelight, thin threads of fat tracing red like faint cartography. Atop it rested a cured quail egg yolk, lacquered amber, membrane peeled away with surgical precision so it would break at the slightest pressure. Shaved black truffle settled over the surface like fine soil after rain. Beside it, a swipe of bone marrow emulsion, whipped until silken, pale as porcelain, faintly glossy where the light caught its fat. A shard of charred sourdough leaned against the mound, structure beside flesh. The aroma rose immediately when Ivan set it down. Deep umami. Iron, barely metallic. Warm animal fat dissolving at the edge of scent. Truffle's musk low and subterranean. He did not over-explain. "Mr. Hallberg, we begin with a heritage Wagyu tartare, hand-cut and dressed lightly in fermented soy reduction. The marrow emulsion has been clarified twice to preserve the mineral finish. The yolk will open the structure." He paused just long enough. "It is dense by design." Mr. Hallberg inclined his head once. Controlled. Not gratitude, acknowledgement. Ivan stepped back precisely half a pace and let the moment hold before motioning for me to present the second plate. Porcelain white this time, luminous against the dark table. Crushed ice formed a bed in the center, refracting candlelight into fractured glints. Resting upon it, a single Guillardo oyster, shucked cleanly, the shell polished until its interior gleamed like enamel. The flesh trembled slightly in its brine. Not alive, but not fully still. Champagne mignonette shimmered atop it, chalet brunoise, cut so fine it seemed suspended rather than floating. Finger-line pearls dotted the surface like green caviar, each sphere catching the light before collapsing. An edible nasturtium petal rested against the curve. Fragile, bright, unnecessary. The aroma here was sharp, clean salinity, cold citrus, the faint mineral breath of tide. Ivan inclined his head toward Mrs. Halberg. For you, a Guillardo oyster with champagne mignonette and citrus pearls. Saline brightness, a reminder of origin. His voice softened by half a degree. It opens. Mrs. Halberg smiled, the kind of smile practiced for photographs. Her fingers were slender, veins faint beneath the skin. She lifted the shell carefully, tipping it so the liquid slid over her tongue in one fluid motion. Her throat worked once. She swallowed quickly. Too quickly. There was the faintest tightening at the base of her jaw, the almost flinch of cold brine and acid striking something deeper. I almost missed it. Ivan did not. He does not miss first reactions. Mr. Halberg had not yet taken his bite. He punctured the yolk deliberately, allowing it to bleed amber over the red of the tartar. He folded marrow into meat with the back of his fork, slow circular motions, ensuring emulsification before lifting it. He chewed without expression, not savoring, assessing. His jaw moved in measured rhythm, no haste, no surprise. I could imagine the progression. First, warmth blooming across the tongue, then fat dissolving at body temperature, the umami settling like weight, the iron note emerging, subtle, intimate, at the back of the palate. He swallowed, inhaled once through his nose. Approval. Mrs. Halberg set her shell down carefully. She reached for her water almost immediately, though the oyster was impeccably balanced. Her fingers lingered on the stem of the glass. Ivan watched them the way a conductor watches tempo. Not staring, never staring. He watches shoulders, throats, the space between bites. Density first, he murmured as we retreated into the margin of the room. It tells us who leads. I nodded automatically. I wasn't sure what he meant. From our position, the dining room became a stage viewed from behind the curtain. We observed without being observed. Mr. Halberg finished first. Of course he did. Mrs. Halberg glanced toward him before placing her fork down, though her plate was empty as well. The glance was brief, reflexive. The ice beneath the oyster had begun to melt, water gathering quietly at the rim of the porcelain. Ivan's gaze flickered to her shoulders. They relax after salt, he said softly. He sounded almost satisfied. I watched them breathe. Mr. Halberg leaned back slightly, opening his chest. His posture whitened. Mrs. Halberg adjusted the fabric of her wrist, smoothing it once, then once more. Her smile returned. Calibrated. They looked balanced, aligned. But I noticed something else. Her breath had quickened after the oyster, then slowed. His breath had deepened after the tartar. as if each dish had entered them and settled differently. Ivan straightened. Course 1, he said, reverent, establishes the palate. His eyes never left the table. And the hierarchy. The word lingered. I felt something shift in me then. Not fear, not yet. Just awareness. The oyster had left a faint saline sheen on Mrs. Halberg's lips. The wagyu had brought a flush to her husband's cheeks. Their bodies were adjusting, synchronizing. Somewhere behind the kitchen wall, the low hum that lives beneath service deepened slightly. Ivan smiled almost imperceptibly. Now, he said quietly, we intensify. Ivan waited until the first course had fully settled. He does not clear too quickly. He says digestion is part of pacing. In the kitchen, course 2 had been resting under a low, warming lamp. Its surface lacquered, but not sweating. Dave stood at the pass, gloved hands steady, watching the final plating with a kind of quiet concentration that borders on intimacy. For Mr. Halberg, a 72-hour dry-aged heritage strip loin, the aging had deepened the color from ruby to something almost garnet at the center. The exterior had been seared over Bincoten charcoal, leaving a fine lattice of char that had crackled faintly when pressed with tongs. The fat cap had been treated with koji, fermented until it broke down, just enough to amplify umami without turning sweet. It rendered under heat into something almost translucent. Beneath the meat, a single spool of veal demi-glace, reduced until nearly syrup thick, a charred pearl onion split in half, shallot ash scattered like punctuation. The aroma was immediate when the plate was set down. Warm iron, a faint sweetness from caramelized protein, fermented depth. For Mrs. Halberg, a butter-poached artichoke heart, trimmed so precisely it looked sculpted rather than grown. The leaves had been removed entirely, leaving only the tender core. It had been submerged in cultured butter at a steady 60 degrees Celsius for just under 40 minutes, long enough to soften without collapse. It rested atop saffron beurre blanc, a pale gold, silk-thin, shimmering at the edges. Threads of preserved lemon lay across its surface like delicate veins. Crispy caper dust added faint salinity. The plate was warmer than the first course, almost intimate in its temperature. Ivan delivered the husband's plate first. Mr. Halberg, a 72-hour dry-aged strip loin, koji-aged fat cap, veal demi-glace reduction. He paused. Structured. Then he turned to Mrs. Halberg. For you, butter-poached artichoke heart with saffron beurre blanc and preserved lemon. A small incline of his head. Yielding. He stepped back. We watched. Mr. Halberg did not wait. He reached for the salt cellar before lifting his knife. I noticed it because Ivan noticed it. He had not tasted yet. He added salt in a measured line along the cut surface before slicing. His blade cut cleanly, the resistance of seared crust giving way to a tender interior. The blade moved confidently, not searching. He lifted the first slice and paused just before placing it in his mouth. Mrs. Halberg watched him, just a fraction of a second. Then she cut into the artichoke. The butter-poached surface gave almost without resistance. The fork slid through it easily, collapsing layers inward. She took a bite, her eyes closed, longer than necessary. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the faint exhale through her nose. The saffron hit first, warm, floral, almost honeyed. Then the butter, thick and coating. The preserved lemon cut through at the back of her tongue, bright and unexpected. Her throat moved slowly this time, deliberate. Mr. Hallberg chewed steadily. The iron note in the meat would have bloomed deeper now, the fermentation from the koji intensifying the umami until it felt almost personal, dense, grounding. His jaw worked once, twice, then he nodded. Barely. Good, he said. Not to us, to himself. Mrs. Hallberg opened her eyes. She did not speak. Her fingers tightened slightly around her fork, then relaxed. Ivan leaned closer to me, not breaking his gaze. They begin to recognize themselves here, he murmured. I swallowed. What do you mean? I asked, keeping my voice low. He didn't look at me. Texture, density, tension. We watched Mr. Hallberg cut another slice before answering further. The meat holds structure. It demands engagement. It responds to pressure. He shifted his gaze toward Mrs. Hallberg. The artichoke yields. It absorbs. It takes shape from what surrounds it. I felt a flicker of discomfort. The husband had finished nearly half his plate. The wife was eating more slowly now. There was a sheen along her lower lip from the beer blanc. She wiped it once with the back of her napkin. Mr. Hallberg reached for his wine before she did. She mirrored him a breath later. Their movements were not synchronized, but they were aware of each other's pacing. At one point, she opened her mouth as if to say something, then stopped. Instead, she took another bite. Ivan watched that moment closely. He watches the pauses. Mr. Hallberg leaned back slightly, resting his hand on the table near hers. Not touching, but close. His breathing had deepened. Hers had slowed. Recognition isn't conscious, Ivan said softly. It's somatic. Mrs. Hallberg swallowed again. This time she lingered with her eyes open. Her gaze unfocused slightly, not distracted, but inward, as if she were tasting something beyond the butter. I realized then what Ivan meant. The dishes did not just suit them, they felt correct, not in preference, in alignment. Mr. Hallberg's meat had weight, authority, a mineral backbone that settled him deeper into his seat. Mrs. Hallberg's artichoke softened at the touch of heat, collapsing inward the longer it remained in contact with sauce. Ivan's mouth curved faintly at the corner. They always respond, he said. How? I asked. He finally looked at me. Watch her shoulders. I did. They had lowered, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but lower. Mr. Hallberg reached for the salt again. This time he did not hesitate. The hum beneath the room seemed to deepen, not louder, just more present. I found myself breathing in rhythm with them. Ivan cleared his throat softly. Cultivation, he said. We intensify what already exists. He straightened his jacket sleeve. And then, he added almost reverently, we retrieve. Before the service resumed, Ivan sent me to the cold room. Retrieve the Hallberg reduction, he said. Top shelf, third from the right. The cold room was immaculate. Stainless racks, clear containers, everything labeled in small, discreet script. No theatrics, no theatrical horror, just organization. I reached for the third container on the top shelf. It was smaller than I expected. A glass jar, vacuum sealed, resting in a shallow metal cradle. Pale contents, smooth, almost translucent. Hallberg M. 1742. Culture 2. Below it in smaller script. Density calibration moderate. My fingers hesitated. Culture. I told myself it meant fermentation. Of course it meant fermentation. Restaurants like this, culture, is everything. Ivan appeared beside me without a sound. You'll acclimate to the terminology, he said calmly. He lifted the jar. It felt heavier than it looked. Back at the pass, Dave was finishing the plating. Course 3 was built around absence. 2 bowls, wide-rimmed, bone white, so thin they almost hummed when set down. At the center of each bowl sat a shallow bowl of clarified consommé. It was nearly invisible. Dave had centrifuged it for hours, removing all fat, all particulate, until it resembled tinted water more than broth. The surface reflected the lights overhead with mirror precision. Suspended in the center of each bowl was a single gel sphere. For Mr. Hallberg, a marrow-based gel, faintly rose-colored, perfectly smooth, about the size of a grape. For Mrs. Hallberg, a tomato water sphere infused with something nearly colorless. It looked delicate, fragile. Dave spooned the contents from the jar into a micropipette and injected the husband's sphere with a measured amount of reduction. He did the same for the wife's. He did not look at me. He did not need to. Ivan leaned toward me. This is where we refine, he said. The bowls were placed in front of them, without explanation at first. Silence is part of the service here. Ivan spoke softly. For you, a clarified consommé, precision extraction. At the center, a sphere calibrated to your intake profile. He did not say what was extracted. He did not need to. Pierce gently, he added. Mr. Hallberg lifted his spoon. The gel yielded easily beneath the pressure of silver. The membrane ruptured. A bloom of deeper color spilled into the broth. He paused. The aroma shifted. The clear broth now carried a faint iron scent. Subtle, clean, not unpleasant. He lifted the spoon to his mouth. The consommé entered first. Almost nothing. Warm water with a mineral trace. Then the interior of the sphere. The marrow. The reduction. It coated his tongue. Dense. Not heavy, but concentrated. I watched his throat. It worked slowly. He inhaled through his nose. The faintest furrow appeared beneath his brows. Not displeasure, recognition. Across from him, Mrs. Hallberg pierced her sphere. The membrane collapsed more quickly than his had. The interior bled into the broth in a blush of muted pink. She brought the spoon to her lips. The consommé was almost sweet at first, then saline. Then her shoulders stiffened. Only for a second. The flavor hit differently for her. I could see it. Her pupils widened slightly. The broth carried something beneath the tomato. Something warm. Something almost coppery. Something faintly floral. She swallowed. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed. She took another spoonful immediately, faster this time, as if to continue. Her fingers tightened around the bowl. Ivan leaned closer to me. "They always taste it," he said. "What?" I whispered. He did not answer. Mr. Hallberg set his spoon down. He looked at his wife for the first time during the meal. "Interesting," he said. His tone was controlled, measured. She nodded. "Yes," she replied. Her voice was softer than before. She took another spoonful, slowly, slower now, as if drawing it out. The broth trembled faintly in the bowl. I found myself noticing details I hadn't before. The way the light refracted differently through her sphere than his. The way his reduction thickened the broth, giving it body. The way hers dissolved almost entirely, leaving only warmth. Ivan watched them with a kind of patient fascination. He doesn't look at mouths. He watches throats. "Memory," he said quietly. Mr. Hallberg finished his bowl cleanly. Not a drop remained. Mrs. Hallberg lingered over the last spoonful. She held it near her lips for a breath longer than necessary, then swallowed, her eyes unfocused again, this time longer. Mr. Hallberg reached across the table. Not touching her, but close. "Good?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes," she said. But there was something else beneath it, something unsettled or stirred. Ivan straightened. He lifted the empty bowls with care. "Retrieval complete," he murmured under his breath. I felt the hum deepen again, and as we turned toward the kitchen, I glanced back once more at the Hallbergs. They were sitting closer now, not physically, but in posture. Their breathing had begun to match, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I could see something reflected in the surface of the empty bowl that did not belong to the lighting above. Reduction is where the kitchen reveals its hand. Not fully, but enough. Dave finished Mr. Hallberg's plate first. The short rib had been braised for 16 hours at a steady 90 degrees Celsius. Collagen rendered, fibers separated, but not disintegrated. It was pressed overnight into a terrine mold, chilled, then portioned into perfect cubes. Each cube had been lacquered in its own reduced braising liquid, a glaze so concentrated it clung like glass. The surface gleamed. A thin shard of charred leek rested diagonally across the top. Smoked sea salt, ground fine, dusted the plate in a subtle halo. The aroma was heavier than previous courses. Dark. Animal. Sweetness from long caramelization, but anchored in something metallic and deep. For Mrs. Hallberg, seared duck breast. The skin had been rendered until crisp, but not brittle. The fat beneath liquefied and reabsorbed into the flesh. It was sliced thin, precise, almost delicate, and fanned across the plate in overlapping layers. Beneath it, blood orange gastrique, glossy and viscous, wilted radicchio, Oh, edges still faintly bitter. A drizzle of aged balsamic reduction spiraled with quiet control. The scent here was sharper, bright citrus cutting through iron-rich meat. Sweetness trying to balance bitterness. Ivan placed the husband's plate first. Braised short rib, he said softly, reduced to its essential form. He did not elaborate. He rarely does at this stage. Mrs. Hallberg's plate followed. Duck breast with blood orange gastrique. Balanced tension. Balanced tension. He stepped back. I watched. Mr. Hallberg cut into the cube with minimal resistance. The knife scraped cleanly through lacquered surfaces into soft interior. Steam escaped in a faint exhale. He lifted the first piece and placed it in his mouth. The glaze clung to his lips briefly before dissolving. He chewed slower than before. The texture here was different. Dense but yielding. The reduction would coat the tongue completely. Sweet, savory, almost sticky. The iron undertone more pronounced now. The sweetness darker. His jaw slowed. Mrs. Hallberg waited until he swallowed before taking her bite. Her knife barely pressed before the duck separated. The skin crackled softly. She placed the slice into her mouth. The citrus hit first, sharp, bright. Then the fat. Then something in her expression shifted. Her eyes did not close this time. They remained wide, fixed somewhere beyond the table. She swallowed. Her breathing changed, shallower. Her hand moved to her throat briefly, just a touch, a reflex, before returning to her fork. Mr. Hallberg reached for his wine again. He did not look at her. Not immediately. He finished his second bite before speaking. "This is exceptional," he said. Not to her, to Ivan. Ivan inclined his head. "Reduction reveals," he replied. Mrs. Hallberg took another bite, slower now. The radicchio's bitterness lingered at the back of her tongue. The gastrique's sweetness bloomed and then tightened. Her lips parted. She inhaled, then she smiled. The smile held longer than it should have. Mr. Hallberg looked at her then, really looked. His gaze lingered on her mouth, her jaw, her throat. And for a moment I saw something I hadn't before. Not affection, assessment. He set his fork down carefully. "You like it?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes," she said. Her voice was softer than in previous courses. Lower. Ivan shifted slightly beside me. "They begin to align here," he whispered. I didn't respond. The hum beneath the dining room had deepened further. It wasn't louder, just closer. Mr. Hallberg resumed eating, faster now. Mrs. Hallberg slowed. Their pacing, which had been staggered, began to converge. He took a bite. She followed half a breath later. He reached for water. She mirrored him. Their shoulders moved in near synchrony. I noticed something else. The flush that colored Mr. Hallberg's cheek earlier had faded. The color in Mrs. Hallberg's lips had deepened. Her posture straightened slightly. His relaxed. Ivan watched the exchange with a kind of quiet satisfaction. See, he murmured. See what? Reduction removes excess, he said. It leaves only what remains. Mrs. Halberg reached across the table then, not deliberately. Her hand rested near his. He did not withdraw. They were not touching, but the space between their fingers was smaller now. The plates emptied, not at different times, but together. Ivan stepped forward precisely when the last bite disappeared. "Shall we proceed?" he asked gently. They both nodded at the same time. Exactly at the same time. Their voices overlapped slightly when they said yes. I felt something in my stomach tighten. Not fear, not yet. Just awareness. The duck plate bore faint streaks of red where sauce had been drawn through. The short rib plate was immaculate, the glaze completely consumed. Ivan gathered the dishes. As we turned toward the kitchen, I glanced back one more time. Mrs. Halberg was looking at her husband with a kind of calm that had not been there before. Not warmth, not longing, something steadier. Mr. Halberg's breathing had slowed. Their head rested closer still. Ivan did not smile, but his posture relaxed. "Next," he said quietly, "we show them." And for the first time, I wasn't sure whether he meant the food. Dave plated reflection alone. No one else touches this course. The lights above the pass dimmed half a shade. Not enough for the guest to notice consciously. Enough to sharpen contrast. On the counter before him sat two shallow mirrored porcelain plates. The glaze so perfectly finished it reflected like mercury. In the center of each plate rested a single medallion. They were identical in shape, perfectly circular, about the size of a silver denarii. Pale pink, faintly marbled, seared only on the surface so that the interior remained soft. No garnish, no distraction. A thin brushstroke of smoked sea salt. Nothing else. The aroma was almost non-existent. Warm. Faintly sweet. Something mineral beneath it. I stepped closer. The medallions were too uniform to be animal cuts. No natural irregularity in the grain. The marbling was precise, almost architectural. Dave lifted a fine brush and lacquered each surface with a transparent glaze. He did not look at me. "Halberg," he said quietly. He placed the plates beneath a small heat lamp, just long enough to bring them to temperature. Then he nodded to Ivan. As Ivan lifted the plates, I caught a glimpse of the cold tray behind Dave. Open. Inside were shallow incubation dishes, each labeled in the same small, discreet script. Halberg M. Halberg E. Culture 3. My stomach shifted. Not violently, just enough. Ivan did not slow. He never slows. The plates were placed in front of them without introduction. He allowed them to see themselves in the porcelain first. Their reflections shimmered beneath the medallions. Mr. Halberg leaned forward. Mrs. Halberg inhaled slightly. Ivan spoke softly. Reflection. He did not elaborate. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, it was attentive. Mr. Hallberg lifted his knife. The blade met the surface of the medallion and parted it cleanly. No resistance. The interior was uniform, soft, almost moose-like, but not whipped, structured. He placed the first bite in his mouth. He did not chew immediately. He closed his eyes. This was the first time he had done that all evening. The flavor would not have been strong at first. Warmth. Then, a taste that does not exist in standard cuisine. Familiarity. The faint metallic trace of blood, not from an animal. The slight sweetness of skin warmed by breath. The mineral note that lingers at the back of the tongue when you bite your lip. He swallowed slowly. His throat worked once, twice. His hand tightened around the fork. Mrs. Hallberg had not yet cut hers. She was watching him. Not nervously, not fearfully, waiting. When he opened his eyes, something had shifted. Not shock, recognition. He nodded once. Subtle. She cut her own medallion. The blade glided through it like softened butter. The interior held no visible grain, no fiber, no seam. She lifted it to her mouth. For a moment, the smallest moment, she hesitated. Then she placed it on her tongue. Her reaction was different, immediate. Her lips parted. Her breath caught, not sharply, but as if the air had thinned. The taste for her would have been layered differently. Warm, soft, then a bloom of something she knew. The faint saline trace of tears. The taste of her own skin when she pressed her wrist to her lips absent-mindedly. The copper whisper of a bitten cheek. The inside of her own mouth. She swallowed. Her hand rose again to her throat. Not to stop it, to steady it. Mr. Hallberg reached across the table then. This time, he did touch her. Just briefly. His fingers closed over hers. Not reassurance, not comfort, confirmation. Ivan leaned closer to me. "Do you see?" he asked quietly. I nodded before I meant to. Their breathing had synchronized again, but this time it was deeper, slower, almost rehearsed. Mrs. Hallberg took another bite. Faster, as if chasing the taste. Her pupils widened slightly. Mr. Hallberg finished his plate in 3 deliberate bites. When he set his fork down, he did not look at Ivan. He looked at her, and she looked back. No words passed between them, but something had settled, something understood. Ivan stepped forward. "Would you care for a second tasting?" he asked softly. They both nodded at the same time. I felt it then. Not doubt, not fear, understanding. The medallions were not symbolic. They were not metaphor. They were cultured, refined, amplified, derived. And if the guests were not disturbed, they were completed. Ivan turned to me as we cleared the plates. His expression was almost tender. "Now," he said quietly, "they know." I glanced once more at the incubation tray in the kitchen, at the labels, at the faintly pink forms resting within shallow dishes. at the precision of it, the elegance, the inevitability. And for the first time, I wondered how many ways my own profile could have been taken. By the time reflection was cleared, the Hallbergs had finished every available medallion, every portion offered, every additional tasting. They had not asked what it was. They had not needed to. Dave plated the additional servings himself. Each medallion identical in diameter, thickness, color. Each delivered warm, never hot, so that it met the body without resistance. With every plate returned empty, Dave's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Not excitement, alignment. He did not smile broadly. He did not speak. But he stood taller. His movements became slower, measured, intentional, as if something he had been waiting for had begun. At table 3, Mr. Hallberg's composure had thinned. Not undone, thinned. His breathing had deepened into something almost audible, a low inhale before each breath. His lips parted slightly between mouthfuls. He no longer cut with precision. He tore. Mrs. Hallberg was no longer hesitating. Her fork moved faster now. Her throat worked visibly. A flush had spread across her chest. Her fingers trembled, not weakly, but with contained urgency. Ivan watched them as one watches a fire catch properly. Not concerned, not excited, attuned. Appetite is truth, he murmured. I felt my palms grow damp. The next plate arrived. No garnish, no reduction. Just the medallion. Dave's eyes met Ivan's briefly across the room. Ivan gave the smallest nod. The Hallbergs did not wait for explanation. They did not speak. They ate. This time Mr. Hallberg's breath hitched mid-bite. A soft sound, almost a groan, escaped him before he swallowed. Mrs. Hallberg's lips glistened. She closed her eyes and leaned back slightly as she chewed, as if the taste required space inside her. I could see it now. This was no longer dining. This was consumption. And it was mutual. Their bodies had begun to mirror each other more than before. He swallowed, she swallowed. He inhaled, she inhaled. The rhythm of their jaws aligned. Ivan leaned towards me. Assimilation follows recognition, he said. I swallowed hard. Assimilation of what? I asked. He didn't answer. Another plate left the kitchen. I saw Dave's hands pause briefly on the rim before releasing it. He looked satisfied. Not because they were eating, because they were emptying. The medallion was placed between them this time, centered, shared. They did not divide it neatly. Their forks crossed, metal struck metal. They did not apologize. They did not hesitate. Mrs. Hallberg's breathing had grown shallow, quick. Her pupils were dilated. Mr. Hallberg's collar had loosened. A bead of perspiration gathered at his temple. They did not wipe their mouths. They did not request water. They did not look away from the plate. I felt my stomach tighten again, sharper now. The cold room label flashed in my mind. Hallberg M. Hallberg E. Culture 3. How many cultures had been grown? How many plates were possible? How much do we have? I asked quietly. Ivan's voice remained calm. As much as they provided. The final dish emerged. It did not resemble the previous medallions. It was plated in a shallow glass bowl, clear. Inside a pale mousse-like form, smooth, almost luminous. Its surface reflected them both at once. Dave had blended the cultures. I knew it without needing to see the label. Ivan took the bowl himself. This, he said softly as he placed it down, is assimilation. Mr. Hallberg leaned forward immediately. Mrs. Hallberg mirrored him. Their breathing had synchronized completely now. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. They dipped their spoons at the same time. The texture yielded instantly, softer than before, airier, but denser at the center. They lifted it together, swallowed together. The reaction was not subtle. Both inhaled sharply through their noses. Both closed their eyes. Both exhaled slowly, almost a sigh. Their shoulders dropped simultaneously. Their posture changed. Not collapse, not weakness, alignment. Mrs. Hallberg's hand moved to rest fully over Mr. Hallberg's. He turned his palm upward instinctively. Their fingers intertwined. No glance, no cue. Ivan's face was serene, not voyeuristic, reverent. Dave stood still at the pass, watching as if observing a completed equation. The Hallbergs finished the bowl without speaking. When they were done, they sat back at exactly the same angle. Their expressions were identical. Calm, content, hollow. The hum beneath the dining room steadied. I felt it in my jaw, in my molars. Ivan turned to me. "Do you understand?" he asked. I looked at the empty bowl, at the mirrored surface, at the reflections merged into one shape, and I understood enough. They had not eaten each other. They had eaten themselves, until there was nothing separate left. Dave nodded once. Service complete. Ivan adjusted his cuff. "They are lighter now," he said softly. The Hallbergs rose from the table in perfect unison. Their movements mirrored. Their voices, when thanking us, carried the same cadence, the same tone, the same volume. As they left, Mrs. Hallberg did not look back. Mr. Hallberg did not either. They did not need to. Ivan watched the door close behind him. His expression did not change. "Assimilation," he repeated quietly. I glanced toward the cold room, toward the trays, toward the labels. The dining room emptied the way a held breath empties, slowly, deliberately, without noise. The Hallbergs left hand in hand. Their movements matched now, not consciously, not performatively, just matched. When the door closed behind them, the room exhaled. The lights warmed, not brighter, warmer. The kitchen doors opened fully this time. not the careful slit used for service. Fully. And the line stepped out. Aprons untied, sleeves rolled, jackets shrugged loose and folded over chairs. No gloves. Never gloves for this. Dave carried the tray himself. Not plated, not divided. A broad ceramic platter, shallow and wide, still radiating heat from within. The surface was not pristine medallions now. It was layered, marbled. Soft seams of pale pink and deeper red, pressed together where cultures had fused. The edges glistened faintly. Steam rose in thin, sweet threads. The smell was warmer than on the floor. Closer. Not the sharp perfume of truffle or citrus. Something rounder. Something lived in. Ivan stepped beside Dave. Family, he said simply. That's what it felt like. No hierarchy now. No assigned positions. They gathered shoulder to shoulder around the pass, close enough that elbows brushed that heat from bodies mingled with the warmth rising from the platter. Someone laughed quietly. Not mockery, not hysteria, recognition. Dave pressed his bare fingers into the surface first. The texture yielded like slow-set custard, then resisted faintly beneath, fibrous and structured. He tore a piece free. It stretched slightly before parting, glossy strands catching the light. He placed it into Ivan's palm. Ivan did not hesitate. He brought it to his mouth, closed his eyes. The reaction was not restrained this time. His breath left him audibly, a soft sound, almost relief. He swallowed, then reached back into the platter. His first, Ivan said, passing a piece to the sous chef. And hers, someone else murmured, selecting a section marbled lighter. They were tasting across the dish, across the guests, across each other. Hands moved easily. No one hoarded. Pieces were torn and exchanged. Try this edge, one said. More iron here, another observed softly. They chewed with their eyes closed, shoulders touching, breaths deep and unguarded. The hum that had threaded through the evening deepened, not mechanical, but almost like shared breathing. I stood at the edge of it, watching. The smell settled into me now. Warm, mineral, faint sweetness, something that lingered at the back of the nose, like the inside of one's mouth after biting down too hard. Ivan turned to me. You'll join, he said. Not a question, an invitation. He tore a piece himself, smaller than the others had taken, more deliberate. He placed it in my hand. The heat surprised me. Not hot, alive, warm. The surface slicked slightly against my skin. Around me, the others were eating freely now, laughing softly, passing pieces back and forth. No utensils, no plating, just hands. I lifted it to my mouth. For a second, just a second, I felt the space before it touched my tongue. The anticipation. My body knowing something was about to happen. Then I tasted it. It did not taste like meat. Not entirely. It tasted like something familiar in the way the inside of your cheek tastes when you press your tongue against it absent-mindedly. Warm, mineral, faintly sweet. There was structure, a memory of resistance, then dissolution. It spread across my tongue faster than it should have. And then recognition, not of flavor, of self. Something in my chest shifted. My breath deepened. The room softened. I swallowed. Ivan was watching me closely, not to judge, to welcome. "There it is," he said quietly. Someone laughed beside me and clapped a hand against my shoulder. "You'll taste differently tomorrow," they said warmly. I didn't pull away. I reached back into the platter, this time without waiting to be offered. The texture felt less strange now. Familiar. I selected a darker marbled section. Someone beside me nodded approvingly. "Good density there," they murmured. We were all breathing in rhythm now. The platter grew smaller. Hands brushed. Pieces were shared without asking. The last section was divided gently, almost ceremonially. Dave took the final piece. He met my eyes as he placed it in his mouth. Then he smiled, not triumphant, completion. The lights cooled slightly. The hum steadied. Ivan wiped his hands on a clean cloth, then rested one hand between my shoulder blades, the same place he had steadied me earlier that night. "You'll take your own table tomorrow," he said. I nodded. My pulse felt even, my breathing slow. The room no longer felt intimidating. It felt right. As the last of the platter disappeared, I realized something else. I was still hungry. I glanced toward the cold room door. Ivan saw it, and he smiled. "Good," he said softly.